Thank you very much for listening to this week's talk on the two last sedras of the book of Bamidbar. And as we complete them, we will say the words Chazak, Chazak, V'nis Chazek, be strong, and let us strengthen ourselves. And I think that we can really actually, in the word, the phrase Chazak, Chazak, V'nis Chazek, we can see there's a certain reference to the singular. Chazak is a word that can apply to one person, to an individual. And nischazek is the plural, we should strengthen ourselves. And I think that we can get a picture of priorities in these two sedras in terms of ourselves as individuals and ourselves as a nation. And we are dedicating our learning to the safety and success of all of the soldiers in the IDF, and to the speedy and complete healing of all of the wounded, and to refuah sheleima for Rivka Yittel bas Rochel. And in terms of this idea of priorities, I think that we can actually start by looking at the fact that this coming Shabbos is the Shabbos Mavarchin, the Shabbos that's going to precede the new month of Av, which will herald the start of the 9 days on next Wednesday. And when we look in the Torah, the portion that we read of the Sedra of Matos, we will see something that we read in as it happened in the Sedra of Chukas, but we have a reference back to the passing of Aaron HaKohen. And we find this in chapter 37, verse 38. Vayal Aaron HaKohen el Har HaHar, and Aaron the Kohen went up to the mountain Hahar, al pi Hashem, according to the word of Hashem, Vayomos Sham, and he died there, Bishnas Ha'arbarim, the Seitz B'nei Yisrael, in the 40th year of the children of Israel's exodus, Me'eretz Mitzrayim, from the land of Egypt, B'chodesh HaChamishi, in the 5th month, B'echad LaChodesh, on the 1st of the month. And this is referring to the Rosh Chodesh of the month of Av. It's counting from the month of Nisan. The 5th month is the month of Av. And we invariably read about the passing of Aaron, the very Shabbos, on an annual basis, that it happens in the following week. And it is the only time that there is a direct mention of the date of the passing of one of the people mentioned in the Torah. The other dates that we know, for example, Moshe Rabbeinu, who was born and died on the 7th of Adar, David HaMelech, who was born and died on Shavuos, King David. All of these we know either from calculating from certain other references in the Torah or from the Medrash. So the only occasion that somebody's passing is mentioned as an exact date in this way is in reference to Aaron HaKohen. And I think, as nothing is coincidence, nothing is random, when we are going into the more intense phase of the 3-week period of mourning that commemorates the destruction of every single national tragedy that in some way was influenced by the events that occurred throughout our history on the 17th of Tammuz through to the 9th of Ab. And we think that Aaron HaKohen, who is a person who, again, is uniquely described for his character traits, and we have this in Pirkei Avos, Ethics of Our Fathers, and this is chapter 1, Mishnah 12. Hillel v'Shammai kiblu mehem. Hillel and Shammai received from them. Hillel Omer. Hillel says, Hevei mitalmidov shel Aaron. Be of the pupils of Aaron. Ohev shalom v'rodev shalom. Ohevas abrias umakorvan laTorah. Loves peace and pursues peace. Loves all the creations and brings them near to Torah. And when we think about all of these unusual facts that converge on the beginning of the time period that commemorates our greatest disasters as a nation, and how so many of them were, if not all of them, were precipitated by our lack of loving peace, pursuing peace, loving all people and creatures, and bringing them near to Torah. That precisely as we enter this time period, we have Aaron HaKohen, who is standing in front of us, beside us, and behind us. Interesting that this Mishnah in Pirkei Avos is referring to his qualities in the present tense, and this is something that we can take such guidance from, and please God, use that as such a preventative tool as we learn from the past. And I think that as we also look at Matos and Masei, we can see this interplay between individual priorities. And it starts off, the Seder of Matos starts off by talking about Nedorim, vows. And this is a complex area because really we have 613 mitzvahs that give us a very comprehensive rule guide book that we need to follow, and it is actually problematic in some ways, although it can be laudable to want to take extra stringencies on oneself to, for example, prohibit to oneself what is actually allowed. And a famous example is the Nazarite who takes upon himself to desist from drinking any form of alcohol, and extra stringencies, and there's a certain grey area about whether this is actually a wrong or a right thing to do. But still, we do have this concept that people can take upon themselves extra stringencies and restrictions. But this is a way that they show they are prioritizing over and above the general level of what is permitted and what is prohibited. And when this is done in the correct way with pure intentions, then this is a good thing. It can bring somebody to higher levels of observance, higher levels of closeness and connection to Hashem. Yet, and then we see again a continuation of this idea of perhaps individual priorities, because as soon as the section that talks about the vows is over, we then have the way that Moshe Rabbeinu is told that he has to go and take revenge upon the Midianites, who were responsible for the terrible events that happened towards the end of the Seder of Balak and the beginning of Pinchas, when the Midianite and Moabite women enticed the people of Israel to behave in a certain way that caused terrible consequences. And this, Hashem then says, chapter 31, verse 1, Vayadaber Hashem el Moshe sheleima, and Hashem says to Moshe, saying, Nakom nikmas b'nei Yisrael me'es hamidyanim. Take revenge against the Midianites on behalf of the children of Israel. Achar teosef el amecha. Then you will be gathered to your people. And this is really saying very clearly to Moshe Rabbeinu that he will pass, he will no longer be alive, he will not lead the people, as has been told to him after the incident in Chukas of the Mei River, when he struck the rock instead of speaking to it. And instead of perhaps delaying, thinking that he can gain some extra time, which would be a normal human reaction, the very next posuk says, Vayedaber Moshe el ha'am lema, and Moshe spoke to the people saying, Hecholtzu me'itzchem anoshim latzova. From yourselves, get men armed and ready for combat against Miriam. And it's very interesting because the Gutnik Chumash, in brackets, even though it's not specifically mentioned in the Torah, the Gutnik Chumash translates, Moshe immediately spoke to the people, saying. So we see Moshe Rabbeinu teaching us in terms of his priority to carry out the word of Hashem, even though he knows absolutely, that this is one step closer to his demise. Instead of being busy with other things, finding another job, putting off that inevitable moment, his priority is whatever consequences will flow to him personally, he is carrying out the word of Hashem. And how much this shows us this priority of Moshe Rabbeinu about him as a person, about him as a leader, about what is important to him, just to follow exactly the words of Hashem. And as we continue and we see we then come to the in chapter 33, the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and half the tribe of Manasseh. And this is, chapter 32. And they have seen that there is very fertile pasture land before they get to the land of a land of Israel. On the other side of the Jordan, instead of going to the land of Israel, they want to stay outside of the land of Israel, as is going to be designated, even though there will be that time that it will also go on to what's called Transjordan. But they are showing their priorities are their fertile pasture ground for their flock. And this is taken as a failing on their part, as something that shows that they have the wrong priorities, that they should have rather wanted to go into the land of Israel with the rest of the people. And Moshe Rabbeinu reacts very, very starkly, and he tells them, he first of all points out that their prioritizing of material wealth over everything, even to the extent that they talk about pens for their animals before they talk about building cities for their children. And they then pick up on his criticism, and they change the order, and they said first they're going to build cities for their children and then pens for their animals. And so they learned the lesson from him, and they assure Moshe Rabbeinu that they are not going to just stay on the other side of the Jordan River and let the other 9.5 tribes go and fight the battles by themselves. First, they will go and fight and conquer the land of then, as it was, Canaan, with the rest of the people. And only once that has been completed will they come back to the area that they wish to settle in order to have the best pasture for their flocks. But this stands as, again, perhaps an individual priority in the wrong direction. And it is a lesson for all of us. This is mistakes that we can all make by focusing on things that might be for our immediate benefit and gratification. And this we are learning from the request of these 2.5 tribes, from the way Moshe Rabbeinu responds to them, and the way they accept what he says and modify their requests, their plans, so that they are going to take a full part in the conquest of the land of Israel. And then if we go to the Sedra of Masei, and it's interesting to note that the Sedra, which means journeys of, literally, in the chapter 33, talks about all of the various stops along the way throughout the wandering in the wilderness for 40 years that the Bnei Yisrael made. And this travelogue occupies 49 pasukim, 49 verses. And just as a comparison, Brias Ha'olam, the creation of the world, is told to us in 31 verses. The Aseres Hadibros, the 10 utterances, are described in 14 verses. And in these 49 verses that talk about, and these are the journeys of the children of Israel, and they went from here and they encamped there. And then there's repetition, and they then journeyed from there and they went to the second place. And this arguably is something that is a huge amount of detail, and we're not necessarily immediately able to see the exact value and benefit of all of this. And Rashi, quoting the Midrash Tanchuma in Posuk 1 of chapter 33, talks about it's a comparison with a king that he has a child who's not well, and he has to go to a distant land to find the right medical attention for this child. And then the child gets healed, and on their way back, the father points out, and this is where we journeyed, and this is where we stopped, and this is where I looked after you in this way here. And each stop is some kind of loving reference to a particular event that happened, that was part of the journey, part of the healing process. And the references to some of these places in these 49 verses are quite obtuse, to the extent that not all of them are actual places, but are references that allude, because Hashem in the Torah does not want to actually embarrass the Jewish people by pointing out specific places where they did something wrong. But this is in a way, our national priority as we look at this list of our journeys, of the things that happen to us as we approach the land of Israel. And we are, as a nation, looking back on what happened, looking back on certain things that we said and did, and how we can improve, how we can look forward to the future, look forward to going into the land of Israel, but look forward in a way that is guided by the events and the mistakes of the past. And this is something, again, just like the references to Aaron HaKohen, that give us specific encouragement as we come up to the 9 days, to the first 9 days of the month of Av, and specifically Tisha B'Av, but also as we come to the land of Israel, as we are embarking on this historical journey, and we are able and constantly guided by the things that happened to us in the past, in these sedras that we read, the Shabbos before the new month of Av. Thank you very much for listening, and wishing everybody Shabbat Shalom.